still here? There we are. No, you're perfectly fine. I was going to bring you in. Sarah Bils. She is an independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and co-founder of DD Geopolitics. Sarah, apparently I was lip reading for a while or given...
Not that long. It was just a little bit.
You know what? I have one of the most humiliating aspects of that. I did that for 20 minutes one time.
I do it all the time.
Oh, it's so humiliating. You're just sitting there because you're not entirely like, I'm not reading the comments constantly. Like I read them every so often, like I kind of bounce back into them. And if I have on another screen, there's no way for me to see the audience screaming at me saying, "We are lip reading." And here,
I was like, he's not gonna see it. You're muted. I was like,
it's like, you're muted. But fair enough. I'll try to cut that part out. That's humiliating, is what it is. It happens.
I do it
all
all
the time. How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm okay. How are you?
I am doing fine. It's early for you. So I always appreciate you getting up this early for me. I thank you for that. KJ is also in California, and KJ ends up coming here so early in the morning. Joe Biden, Blinken, all of these people are giving their legacy tours at this point. Joe Biden, in fact, I want to get your take on something. So Joe Biden said, oh, by the way, before I get to that, TikTok. So after all of the pressure that was being applied to TikTok, after them saying they're going to get rid of TikTok, after the Supreme Court did their ruling and going into whether they're going to keep TikTok or not, Joe Biden has come out and effectively said, or the reporting is, that they're not going to move on TikTok.
No, they're leaving it.
That they basically did all of that threatening, they passed all of that legislation, all to get to the point of saying, well, I'm not going to enforce it. I'm just going to pass it to Trump. Isn't that amazing? Do you think it was all a bluff?
I don't know, but they created quite a mess, whether it was a bluff or not. I think that in that instance, the toothpaste is out of the tube. You're not going to get these kids back to TikTok now. They're having so much fun talking to their Chinese counterparts. I think that that's what happened, maybe, is that they saw that, people were flocking to Red Note. There's been so many wonderful conversations about medical bills and student loans, and they were like, crap, like we better not make this decision final, because it could turn into a national security issue for them anyway. One of my favorite stories was one of the Chinese netizens said, hey, Americans, do you really have to pay for ambulance rides, or is that propaganda that our government tells us?
It depends on the state, I suppose. I mean, I remember when they were telling people they had to pay for, in Richmond, at one point we did have to pay for, they had to pay for ambulances if you got sick or ill or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's humiliating. And it's like the richest country on the planet, and yet we can't appropriate our resources to ensure that people are fed, or people have their medical bills covered, or people can get an education in order to improve their social, or for that matter, intellectual standings. That stuff should just be part of a society that we ourselves decide upon and say, yes, this is something that is to the betterment of each and every person in our society, and that's what we're going to have. And then when they get the opportunity to see other countries, Europe, or for that matter, China, and they're like, wait a minute, you mean people actually get these things? You mean governments can come together and make a choice and say, hey, these are things that we prioritize because, they're in the best interest of our country? Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It's kind of always like these places that our government tells us are run down, third world, no plumbing, China, Russia. And then, you go there, or you wind up on Red Note and you're like, oh. It just kind of blows these people's minds. And they're like, oh, you guys have running water. I mean, one of the netizens said, I mean, Chinese healthcare can get kind of expensive. I paid $60 for an operation the other week. And the Americans were showing their medical bills, and the Chinese people were like, and then, you'll be like, well, why can China have free medical care? And then comes the next slide. Oh, well, they have it, but their economy is falling apart. So they won't have it for long because it destroyed their economy.
It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. I tell you this, I was in Egypt. And I was at a clinic in Egypt. I had to get treatments periodically. And as I was sitting in the clinic, a guy comes out, German. He also offers me a cigarette. I thought he was Egyptian. I didn't even realize he was German, but whatever. He offers me a cigarette. Him and I are sitting there smoking. And he turns to me, he says, "How much are you paying for this?" He knew I was American. Like, Americans, you don't have to open your mouth for people to know you're an American. And I say, "Yeah, I had to pay $250 for this." And he's like, "Really?" He says, "My government covers this." Basically, not only is the healthcare free in Germany, I mean, they pay through their taxes, but if they go to another country and have to get treatment in another country, their insurance in Germany also covers the costs in that other country. And I'm sitting there like,
I had to get traveler's insurance.
Yeah. It's like, thanks for that, bro. It's like, thanks for letting me know that. But and as I told him, the moment that you leave America, your insurance stops. Like, there is no, if you had Medicare, if you had Medicaid, that stuff stops the moment that you leave the border. If you had any kind of insurance, it stops when you leave the border. That is not true for other countries in Europe. Just astonishing.
It is.
Wow. I'm glad those kids were getting a lesson on that stuff. Good for them.
It's great. And they're all learning Chinese.
And they're all learning Chinese.
It couldn't have gone better than this. It really couldn't have gone better than this.
It's what they get. I mean, it's like, because the same thing they're doing to TikTok is the same thing they did to RT and Sputnik, where they're like, "We don't like what you guys are saying." And we don't even have the reach. Like, we don't even have that level. Like, we never even had the level of reach that TikTok had in regards to the number of people who use the application. Their application is like 1 billion people, if not more. And they were like, "Well, we don't like what you guys are saying, so we want to get rid of you." Okay, fair enough. It was the same thing on TikTok, where Mitt Romney was having a conversation, I believe, with Blinken. Mitt Romney was having a conversation with Blinken, and he admitted that, look, the conversation that they were having on TikTok about Israel and Gaza was let's say, the inspiration for many of the political leaders to come out and get rid of TikTok. And when you listen to people like Thomas Massey pointed out that each Congress member has an Israeli minder, like somebody from like AIPAC or some of these other lobbying groups have minders watching various Congress members to engage with them on various legislation in order for them to go in a particular direction with the legislation. So it's not shocking that these people have getting paid $100 million from Israeli lobbies turn around on an application that is criticizing Israel.
Right.
It's just, it just goes beyond their, it's anti-American to go through with it, though, if that makes sense. At least that's my take.
For sure. It's anti-American to take orders and bribes from of an entity that has foreign interests and then use them to make policy in America. It's wild. The whole thing is wild.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go to Joe Biden for a bit, and then I want to go to Blinken. So Joe Biden, like I say, began his farewell tour. Ugh. He gave his farewell speech yesterday that I kind of tore apart in my show yesterday. But I want to go to this part first. Joe Biden knew that Netanyahu was indiscriminately murdering people, regardless of what he said. He knew it. It was transparent that it was happening. But the White House kept acting like this wasn't the case. And we even got this information, I think it was DropSite, pointed out that in one of the reports that came out from the State Department, the U.S. government changed what they were coming out with because they said effectively Israel is committing starvation. And Joe Biden, White House, forced them to change the starvation angle because they didn't want to deal with the fact that they were starving the population. This is Joe Biden when having this conversation. I think he's talking to Lawrence O'Donnell. Listen to what he says here about indiscriminate murder.
When I went to Israel, immediately after their attack by Hamas, 8 days later, whatever it was, and I told him we were going to help. And I said, "But Bibi," I said, "you can't be carpet bombing these communities." And he said to me, "Well, you did it. You carpet bomb, not his exact words, but you carpet bomb Berlin. You dropped a nuclear weapon. You killed thousands of innocent people because you had to in order to win a war." I said, "But that's why we came up with the UN. New deals by which what we would do relative to civilians and military."
So he was comparing 21st century war tactics, battle tactics, with World War II.
Well, what he was really doing is he was going after me for saying you can't indiscriminately bomb civilian areas.
I think what Joe Biden misses here is that
There's
well,
so many things that he misses there.
yeah, like that clip is astonishing because they were indiscriminately bombing and killing civilians. That's what they were doing.
He knew that they were going to. And the best part is, it's like, I guess that Joe Biden only has like a memory for the 20th century because we carpet bombed after the UN was made. I don't know what that had to do with that.
Yes.
That's why
it's like you were killing in Afghanistan. You were doing this
so the
in
UN
Iraq.
could bomb them with you. I don't know what this means.
That clip is astonishing. That clip is just astonishing. Like it's so much in that clip. Like they're fundamentally dropping this context that we paid for 70 to 80% of that indiscriminate killing.
Yeah.
We paid for it. We covered that. And so it's like they're having this conversation like, yeah, Bibi was going after me saying that you indiscriminately kill people. It's like you were backing him and you knew he was doing that.
Yeah.
All the way through.
I love the way he said it too. Like I love it, his senility. He's so frank. He's like a baby or like a drunk person. There's not a lot of filter, right? And he's just like, all right, Bibi, but you can't be doing that carpet bombing again. Like that was the tone. You can't be doing that again. And it was like, what he's gonna do. It's fantastic.
Just amazing.
You have to laugh to keep from crying. But I'm glad that this stuff is coming out already because we all know he's not long for this world. So it needs to come out. And these blips of well, they are senile, but they're also clarity with no filter are really important. That clip was incredibly telling. Telling. They know that they've been mowing the lawn when they go in there in prior engagements.
Yep.
So even when, and it's funny, the comparisons that they used, because those are Hasbara talking points. If you get into arguments, even with the lowest level pro-Israel people, they always bring up Dresden. They always bring up Nagasaki, Hiroshima. They always do. It's always it's a deflection.
Yeah.
So.
It's a deflection. Not to mention, this is a war on a civilian population. It's not like two militaries going at each other.
Not at all. And they knew that. That's terrifying.
Yeah. One of the things I want to get to also. So Pezeshkian is in Moscow.
They just signed it while we were here.
Oh, good. Okay. They just signed the deal. So there was this conversation about what was going to be in that deal. And for the longest time, they kept saying there was going to be a security agreement, a security agreement, a security agreement. And so when they made the news today that Pezeshkian was going to Moscow in order to sign that agreement, do we know what's in that agreement yet?
I don't think that we know, but we do know it has we don't know the exact specifics. So there's a trade and investment section. It will boost the economic trades from 15%. They will increase by 15% and 3.77 billion. There would be stronger military cooperation and a stronger cultural ties. But what I think now we're doing is not a defense alliance. Russia, this is me going on a limb. Russia's got to keep Iran back into keep them in, because Iran is liberalizing, and Pezeshkian has already shown that he's not afraid to ask the United States for sanctions lifting or what he needs to do for that. So this might be just as much about the defense of Iran as it is about Russia keeping them under their sphere of influence.
Interesting. There's a question about whether or not Donald Trump and his team is somehow negotiating back channel with Iran.
Well, I think Pezeshkian is an ineffective leader. He's just inexperienced and he's not ready. And I think he's way over his head, given the geopolitical situation. Say if he was president in maybe 2010 to 2015, he might have been able to get away with it. But not right now in this huge time of regional flux. And so I think that he has a strange trust of the West that these kind of doe-eyed new westernized politicians have. Like maybe Pashinyan has those kind of Zelensky, right? And maybe these leaders are like, well, maybe I shouldn't trust the United States that much. And, so it could be Russia doing that. And it just feels like it's more, it's not just a military thing. It's a lot of like the cultural exchange is important. That like binds two countries together pretty tightly. So you'll see a lot of exchanges in university students, work exchange programs and stuff like that. And that'll build stronger ties, but it's probably also to keep Iran under Russia's sphere of influence.
No, that makes sense. I took it from the military angle that Israel was going to be an issue. I mean, this is fascinating to me because if indeed Donald Trump is going to go in with a pressure campaign against Iran, okay. By the same token, though, he's also trying to make a deal in order to end the war in Ukraine. It's like, okay, but these two things come in conflict with one another, especially with Russia's relationship with Iran. And so for all of this agitation that Israel wants to strike Iran, and it's like, okay, if the U.S. helps with that, then the U.S. is back at loggerheads with Russia again. Like there's these relationships are fraught with all sorts of difficulties. At the moment that you go after one, you go after the other. How do you see it in that context? I mean, do you think Israel is still aiming and angling to attack Iran? And do you think they're going to be on board for that if indeed they do?
I think that Israel is at a point where Israel's not ready to stop fighting. I don't know that they really care who they fight. They have a set options of who they need to go to war with.
Yeah.
So the other day they bombed HTS. So they obviously still have cleanup duty to do there. Their Negal community committee came out with the report that said Israel needs to arm and get ready for posturing against Turkey. Then we have the Iran element. So Israel's got a lot of options to stay fighting a war. I don't think that they necessarily need to go to Iran now, nor do I think it would be smart. I think that they should not, this isn't what I want them to do, please understand, but I think that to be safe, they should go with Turkey. Testing out Turkey as a NATO adversary is going to be a lot easier than overextending yourself all the way to Iran and then trying to make sure Turkey doesn't really move too much in Syria. It's just too much work. Plus, there's a mess brewing in Iraq, inevitably, because the border's becoming porous again. So they have a lot of work to do in the Levant and in that kind of peninsular area. Plus, they have an issue going on in Somalia where they want to build a base in Somaliland to keep an eye on Ansarallah, and they're still bombing there. So they still have a lot of options before they even. I feel like Iran is like the final boss. There's a lot of
no, please.
But there's a lot of just cleanup and stuff, loose ends that need to be tied up before that even becomes a thing. Because you don't know if you start going to war with Iran, is Ansarallah going to come out of nowhere and fight alongside them? Is Iraq going to fight alongside them? What's going to happen? So I think that they're better off kind of just moving along in a straight line, sort of.
What do you make of the deal with Gaza? Donald Trump apparently pushed Netanyahu into a deal. Channel 4 was complaining. They were blaming Trump in this, and I'm using the term blame because from their point of view, this is a disaster. Smotrich, what's the other name? Ben Gvir. These two creatures have effectively said they'll collapse the government if they go through with it, because from their point of view, this is a loss. There was complaints that they thought Donald Trump was going to give them more time to do more killing in Gaza and the West Bank. I mean, I'm being serious. And they were shocked that Donald Trump took this position in order to pressure them to take the deal. Now, give me your take on this, because this is complicated all the way through, whether it's going to go through, whether they're going to maintain it, whether the U.S. is going to push Israel to keep it. All of these things are questions that are just kind of looming. And what did Trump give to get it? Like, meaning, did Trump say, you can annex the West Bank and we'll back you in annexing the West Bank, but we need a deal in Gaza? Give me your take on this.
Ben Gvir did resign. If he does resign, it doesn't necessarily crash the government. But at the very last minute, Smotrich put up his own deal, and Bibi actually needs Smotrich more than he needs Ben Gvir. So that wasn't like the end of the world. People thought the government was going to collapse. Well, if Smotrich would have also left, which these party names are so funny. They're like Jewish Zionism and Jewish Power are the two parties. But
just think of somebody white power group.
Basically, Bibi went to him and was like, not only will I give you more power, but Smotrich wanted a guarantee that the war would restart, and it would start with a vengeance. Like, it would be like that would be like the end all be all. And whether or not that deal came through, something made Smotrich stay, because he's still there, and the ceasefire has been signed. I don't like, and I don't know if you want to get into this yet, but I don't like the Western language around this ceasefire. It's terrifying. Mike Waltz, especially the incoming admin. I'm not even talking about the old admin. They're gone. Ceasefire is gone when the old admin's gone. Or the ceasefire starts when the old admin's gone. But like Mike Waltz yesterday was like, I think Hamas would like to believe this is the end of the war, but it's not. Like, they are fully committed to going right back to war. And I really caution people from these premature celebrations because there's no diplomacy going on here. It's a hostage exchange and a temporary ceasefire. This isn't peace by any means. We're not even close to it. Not to mention you mentioned the West Bank, the uptick in violence in the West Bank, which is getting completely out of hand. And now IOF is getting in there even more. So no, this is a ceasefire. And I feel like people are looking at it like a peace deal, and it's a reprieve. You're going to get 6 weeks maximum of no bombs, maximum. And that's to say that Israel holds to their word. What happens if what happens if Israel killed some of those hostages between now and when the ceasefire starts? Does that break the ceasefire when Hamas hands them back dead and Israel thought they were alive? Like, there's so many conditions placed on Hamas that they have to adhere to. Just wait until there's one minor slip up and Israel says, that's it, ceasefire's over. Also, whatever happened to the ceasefire in Lebanon? They've been bombing Lebanon all week. So that's a ceasefire.
Exactly. Good. Like, and that was the point I made, right? Like, apparently there's a ceasefire in Lebanon. It hasn't stopped Israel from its bombings. No. And, you could think of anything real or imagined that Hamas does that Israel once again resumes. And will the administration hold Israel accountable for doing so? The previous administration didn't.
So important you said real or imagined, because they make up stuff all the time. They have full control of the North. And I don't know if your listeners, well, I hope they remember, but I remember when fighting had died down and then out of nowhere, Israel was like, oh, Hamas has regrouped in the North. And it's like, how? It's rubble and you guys have full control of it. And it's just an excuse to go in there and do training events and bomb more people. So exactly, real or imagined. Anything that they say the Western politic just takes it at face value. That's why I keep saying there's so many things that Hamas has to do, so many hoops that they had to jump through. It's near impossible given the situation that they're in.
There's also this other element to it, that the moment that you give up the hostages, there's nothing stopping Israel from resuming the war, right?
They literally said that. Mike Waltz said that last night or yesterday in an interview. He said,
well, right here, I got the interview.
Great, because I posted it last night.
Yeah, I just play it. So this is him talking about the thing, because there's this other question, right? Netanyahu, his objective was to destroy Hamas politically and militarily. Well, you get Blinken saying Hamas has reconstituted its forces in that region. Okay, fair enough. Then there's this question of, okay, well, what was it for? And then you get this thing of like, okay, well, what is the government going to look like? Because there are multiple stages to the negotiations that are supposed to take place. One is supposed to give back the hostages. Israel's supposed to give back thousands of Palestinian hostages. Hamas is supposed to give back the Israeli hostages and the Americans and whoever else they have holding on to. There's supposed to be humanitarian assistance being dumped into Gaza. And then there is supposed to be like this question of who's going to run Gaza? What is going to be the political organization of God? That is an open question at this point. And according to Israel, Hamas ruling Gaza is a red line, but by the same token, Hamas is not going to just, destroy itself at the behest of Israel. So this is Mike Waltz. Now, part of this could be red meat for their base, like effectively saying, well, of course, we're going to back Israel. Of course, we got them 1,000%. Just because we're bringing this to a deal doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to back our guy. Basically, giving the base what they require to shut the hell up and accept the deal. But I don't know. This is Mike Waltz.
And from your perspective, if this deal goes through and we enter what's characterized as the first phase, does that effectively mean the war is over? Does a ceasefire mean that its work is done in Gaza for the foreseeable future?
Well, I certainly think Hamas would like to believe that, but we've been clear that Gaza has to be fully demilitarized. Hamas has to be destroyed to the point that it cannot reconstitute, and that Israel has every right to fully protect itself. So, all of those pieces, all of those objectives are still very much in place.
Yeah. So I guess the question is Hamas going to commit suicide? I guess that's the question.
I don't know, but they've
Yeah,
all
I don't have an
even
answer.
further in that interview, I think that they were like, absolutely no Hamas in this government. There will be no
Yeah.
Hamas in this government. So whether, I mean, obviously we know the whole romanticizing, you can't kill an idea. Well, you could sure make sure it doesn't reconstitute for a while. So I think that's kind of the game plan
Yeah.
here. I also think that there will
But
be
they've
full
already said. Well,
What's
Blinken
that?
has already said that Blinken has already said that Hamas has reconstituted itself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the
So-
boogeyman's back already.
yeah, so like I don't know what that looks like,
And
and
that's the
that's
best part. Like the ceasefire comes out, and Anthony Blinken says, "Well, he's just setting it up for later, lining up the pins in case Donald wants to knock him down," and saying, "Not only have they reconstituted, they've recruited more. They have more now than they did before." Bitch, how?
yeah.
Also,
Well,
but then the pro-Palestinian camp goes, "Oh hell yeah, we're still in this." I'm like, stop saying that. You are not still in this. So they're just setting it up so later on when they say there's Hamas operations and they want to carpet bomb the place.
I mean, there is something to say though. If you kill 10,000 babies, people are going to feel some kind of way. And so it doesn't really shock me that if more people were flocking to sign up to resist at the point where it's like, my kid was killed, my
Sure.
nephew was killed, my uncle was killed, my teacher was killed. Like that stuff burns. Like how do you do that and then say, okay, now we're just going to go back to normal? I don't know how you do that.
You don't.
Go for it, please.
No, you can't. You don't. You just can't.
Yeah.
You don't come back from that. That if you have that initial feeling of vengeance, it usually doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
then there's this other question of, because at a certain point, they're supposed to let the people go back to northern Gaza. And it's like, there is no northern Gaza.
The moon? Send them to the
Yeah.
moon. It looks like the moon.
Yeah, they destroyed it. I was showing some of the images earlier today. Like it is flattened. So yeah, man. Sarah, I always appreciate talking.
This
to
was a
you.
good one.
I really do. Thank you for this.
Good one.
I really appreciate it. Sarah Bils, she is independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and co-founder of DD Geopolitics. Definitely check her out, especially on Twitter. I always find you and your information on Twitter. I always appreciate you. So thank you for
Thank
this.
you very much. And we will talk soon. Bye.
Absolutely. You have a good one. Be safe.